Park Jae-won ruled Bay Street with a fist wrapped in Loro Piana cashmere. Tonight, everything changed when the woman in the kitchen uniform walked into the Meridian's sealed inner sanctum, the Black Vault they called it, 30 feet below street level, soundproofed, swept for bugs twice a day. When she spoke, it wasn't in English. It wasn't in Mandarin or French or any of the 5 languages the room's combined wealth had paid to master. It was Gyeongsang-do, old coastal Gyeongsang-do, the dialect his grandfather had carried from Busan's docks to a shipping empire that smelled of salt and dried blood. With 11 words, she stopped Park Jae-won's grandfather cold, an 83-year-old man who had not flinched in the face of a UN sanctions hearing turned to stone. What did she say? And who is she really? Stay. This isn't just a story. This is a blood debt, 70 years overdue. The Meridian Private Club occupies the bottom 3 floors of a glass and limestone tower at the corner of Bay and Wellington, tucked inside the financial corridor where Toronto's money quietly multiplies. Above ground, it announces itself with nothing more than a brushed steel plaque and a doorman who never smiles. Below ground, the club is a different universe entirely. Low amber lighting, Macassar ebony paneling, a wine cellar with a waiting list longer than some people's mortgages. The air smells of leather and cedar and the particular kind of silence that only money can purchase. On any given Tuesday, the Meridian's guest list reads like a soft audit of Canadian power. Cabinet ministers pretending to be civilians, hedge fund founders pretending to be scholars, a tech billionaire pretending to be humble over a $200 glass of Barolo. The service staff, 32 of them, most holding advanced degrees from institutions that would embarrass the members they served, are trained to be furniture, visible only when needed, otherwise atmospheric. Adaeze Okonkwo is furniture tonight. She is 29 years old, Igbo Nigerian by blood and Toronto by choice, with a face that is simultaneously open and guarded, wide-set dark eyes that take everything in and give nothing back, cheekbones that catch light like polished bronze, and a stillness about her that servers twice her age have not yet mastered. She wears the club's black uniform with the precision of someone who knows that invisibility is a skill, not a condition. Her hair is pulled back, her hands are steady. She moves through the room with the quiet efficiency of water finding its path. She is also, though no one in this building knows it, a former intelligence analyst for the African Union Commission, fluent in 7 languages, including 2 she has never listed on any document she intends to be found. One of those languages is the reason she is here. Park Jae-won arrived at the Meridian at 10:45, flanked by 2 men whose posture made their profession obvious. He is 41, second-generation Korean-Canadian, educated at Upper Canada College and then the London School of Economics, and he runs a corporate architecture that is, on its most public surface, a constellation of logistics firms, real estate holdings, and renewable energy ventures. Below that surface, below 2 or 3 more surfaces, each more expensive to excavate than the last, Park Jae-won is the man who controls the movement of certain goods along the Great Lakes corridor, who manages certain relationships between certain communities and certain officials, who makes problems disappear with the quiet finality of winter burying a road. He is broad-shouldered and immaculately dressed in a charcoal Keaton suit, his black hair silvering at the temples in a way that reads as authority rather than age. His face is interesting rather than handsome, a strong jaw, a slight asymmetry, eyes that are dark and perpetually calculating. Women are drawn to him, men are cautious around him. He cultivates both reactions deliberately. Tonight, he is meeting his grandfather for the first time in 4 years. Park Dae-shik, or Park Halmoni, calls him the mountain that does not move, flew in from Busan on a private charter that landed at Pearson 3 hours ago. He is 83 years old, built like compressed stone, and he has flown across the Pacific because he has heard things about his grandson's operations that displease him. He does not use phones for conversations that matter. He does not send emissaries. When Park Dae-shik is displeased, he arrives. In the black vault, the old man sits at the head of the table. He has refused every item on the menu. He is drinking scorching barley tea that the kitchen prepared wrong, too pale, wrong temperature, and he has not acknowledged the error because acknowledging it would require someone here being capable of serving him properly, which he has already decided is impossible. The problem begins when Park Dae-sik begins to speak. Jae-won speaks standard Seoul Korean, educated, formal, the language of his parents' assimilation. His grandfather speaks Busan Gyeongsang-do with the full coastal accent, the heavy tonal drops, the old maritime vocabulary, the layered honorifics of a man who learned to speak before the Korean War reorganized everything. These are technically the same language, the way a Glaswegian pub argument and a BBC broadcast are technically the same language. The gap is not insurmountable, but it is wide enough, and Jae-won's grasp of his grandfather's dialect is shallow enough that the old man's most important sentences, the ones laden with proverb and implication and old-world subtext, arrive in Jae-won's mind as general shape without precise meaning. The grandfather knows this. He has always known this. It is part of why he is displeased. For 30 minutes, Park Dae-sik speaks, and Jae-won responds in careful Seoul Korean, and the two men have a conversation that is technically taking place in the same language and functionally happening in two different rooms. Two advisors seated against the wall, Kevin Lim and a man everyone calls Shanghai, exchange glances that Jae-won cannot afford to see. The old man's eyes, sharp and obsidian dark, sweep the room. He catalogues everything: the too soft lighting, the too comfortable chairs, the absence of real ceremony and how the drinks were served. His grandson's men, hovering at the walls in their expensive suits, who look like security but move like bureaucrats. 너희들은 다 물러졌어, he says with the flat authority of a verdict being handed down. You've all gone soft. Jae-won catches the general meaning, the specific weight of the phrasing, the coastal inflection that adds layers of ancestral shame and disappointment that Seoul Korean does not encode in the same way, lands on him like a thud rather than a blade. Adaeze is in the room to clear the tea service. She has been listening since the meeting began, not because she planned to, but because the moment Park Dae-sik opened his mouth, her body made the decision before her mind caught up. The Gyeongsang-do dialect hit her brainstem like a bell being struck. Every nerve ending she had spent 5 years trying to quiet snapped upright. She crosses to the side table, begins quietly collecting the unused glassware, her back half turned, her ears completely forward. The old man is speaking now about a specific shipment 6 months ago through the Windsor corridor. He is using an old Busan dockworkers idiom, 물고기가 항구를 기억한다. The fish remembers the harbor. In his dialect, with his particular intonation, it means that evidence has a way of returning to its origin, that something his grandson thinks is buried is in fact swimming. Jae-won nods, interpreting this as a general warning about loose ends. It is not a general warning, it is a specific one. The old man is telling his grandson that one of the men in this room tonight is the evidence, that one of these suited loyalists is the fish, that his grandson is sitting in a vault with a traitor and doesn't know it because he can't hear deeply enough into his own language. Adaeze's hands pause on a glass. She places it back on the tray slowly, buying herself 3 seconds. The old man's eyes flick to her, just for a moment, the way a hawk's eye moves without the head following. He has noticed her stillness. He has noticed the pause. He looks away. Then he says something that makes the glass rattle softly against the tray. He says it in the deepest coastal Gyeongsang-do, the dialect beneath the dialect, the one the old Busan fishermen used among themselves so the Japanese colonial officers couldn't follow. He uses the structure of a particular proverb. 바다는 아는 사람에게만 속을 보여준다. The sea only shows its depths to the one who knows how to look. He is not talking about the sea. He says, 이 방에서 나를 이해하는 사람이 한 명 있어. 그런데 내 손자는 아니야. In this room, there is one person who understands me, and it is not my grandson. A silence that lasts exactly 2 seconds. Then Adaeze says quietly, without turning around, her Gyeongsang-do carrying the full coastal weight, the honorific architecture immaculate. 할아버지, 그 고기는 지금 이 방에 있습니다. Grandfather, the fish is in this room right now. The room does not freeze, it does something worse. It goes absolutely, comprehensively silent, with the specific quality of silence that happens when a very expensive machine suddenly stops making the sound it is supposed to make. Kevin Lim's hand moves toward his jacket. Shanghai doesn't move at all, which is more alarming. Park Dae-shik stares at the back of the woman in the kitchen uniform. Park Jae-won stares at his grandfather staring at the woman in the kitchen uniform. Adaeze sets the tray down, turns around, meets the old man's eyes. She holds his gaze, both hands visible, unhurried, with the specific calm of someone who has already decided that this moment is the one they have been working toward for a long time. Park Dae-shik speaks first. 어떻게 알았어? How do you know this dialect? 할머니가 가르쳐 주셨어요. My grandmother taught me. 할머니가 어디 출신이야? Where is your grandmother from? 이바단이요. 하지만 1952년에서 54년까지 부산에 계셨어요. Ibadan, but she was in Busan from 1952 to 1954. The old man's face does something Jae-won has never once seen it do in 41 years of knowing it. It moves. Her name was Nurse Jae-won Okonkwo. She was 22 years old, Igbo Nigerian by blood. She was 22 years old when she arrived in Busan in the autumn of 1952 with a Nigerian Red Cross contingent attached to the British Commonwealth Forces. She was small and precise and did not flinch at anything, which made her valuable in a war hospital that had long since exhausted its supply of people who did not flinch. Park Dae-shik was 19. He had survived the crossing of the Nakdong River with a shrapnel fragment in his left shoulder that the field medics had declared close enough to the artery to leave alone. He lay in a cot in a Busan staging hospital for 6 weeks. Jae-won Okonkwo changed his dressings every morning for 5 of those weeks. She taught him 3 Yoruba proverbs. He taught her Busan fisherman's dialect. They were, as far as either family later acknowledged, nothing more than a nurse and her patient. But Park Dae-shik gave her something before she shipped home. A small brass compass, naval issue, with 3 characters engraved on the case. Ichima, don't forget. Jae-won Okonkwo gave him something too, but that part of the story comes later. Adaeze does not tell all of this in the Black Vault. She tells enough. The compass, the dialect, the proverb her grandmother repeated every evening of Adaze's childhood like a prayer. Bada는 아는 사람에게만 속을 보여준다. When she finishes, the old man is quiet for a long time. Then he looks at his grandson and says, in precise Seoul Korean so that no nuance is lost, 이 여자는 남아있어. 다른 것은 기다리고. This woman stays. Everything else waits. Jae-won's expression does not change. This is one of his skills, the ability to absorb a blow without letting it show in the face. But the blow lands. His grandfather has just elevated a kitchen worker over an entire room of his blood-vetted organization in front of the men whose respect Jae-won has spent 20 years cultivating. Kevin Lim is already sending a message from his phone under the table. Shanghai watches Adaeze with the particular quality of attention a person pays to something they intend to eliminate. Over the next 4 hours, Park Dae-shik uses Adaeze as his translator for everything. Not because he cannot communicate in other registers, he is a man of considerable linguistic range when he chooses, but because he wants to, because the Gyeongsang-do dialect, when spoken with the full cultural weight of its coastal honorifics, is not just a language, it is a test, and the only person in the room who can pass it is the woman in the kitchen uniform. Adaeze translates with the precision of a surgeon. She doesn't soften or amplify. When the old man's words have thorns, she translates the thorns. When he deploys a proverb with 3 layers of implication, 호랑이는 죽어서 가죽을 남기고 사람은 죽어서 이름을 남긴다. Tigers leave their skin behind, men leave their names. She renders it not as a philosophical musing, but as the specific warning it is, that Park Jae-won's current operations will leave a mark that cannot be cleaned. Jae-won watches this. He is furious. He is also, despite everything, mesmerized. He has never had anyone translate his grandfather to him accurately before. He has spent his entire life interpreting the old man through imprecise filters, making decisions based on approximations of ancestral wisdom. What he is hearing now, the full texture of his grandfather's intelligence, his strategic mind, the particular poetry of the way he speaks about power and consequence, is arriving for the first time at full fidelity. It is like hearing a piece of music you've always known through a wall suddenly played in the room with you. He does not know whether to be grateful or terrified. The moment the traitor is identified happens quietly, almost gently. Park Dae-shik asks Adaeze to translate a single sentence to the room. Whoever spoke to the Meridian security director 3 Thursdays ago should stand up now. The silence is absolute. Then Shanghai, who is not moved for 4 hours, makes the smallest possible motion. His right foot shifts, barely perceptible, a fraction of an inch toward the door. It is not a flinch. It is the ghost of a flinch, the body's betrayal before the mind can stop it. Adaeze sees it. The old man sees it. Jae-won, who is watching Adaeze watch the room, sees it a half-second later through the lens of her attention. Shanghai is escorted out by 2 of the grandfather's men who had arrived with him from Busan and have been standing silently in the hallway for the last 4 hours. The whole transaction takes 11 seconds and makes no sound at all. Then there were 5. 3 days later, Jae-won calls Adaeze to his office on the 34th floor of a Bay Street tower. She comes dressed as herself, dark wide-leg trousers, a cream blouse, her natural hair framing her face in a way the kitchen uniform never allowed. She sits across from him at a desk the size of a dining table and regards him with the same unhurried attention she showed in the Black Vault. "You were investigated," he says, which is not an apology, but is offered in a tone that contains the structural skeleton of one. "I know," she says. "Your man spoke to my former landlord in Little Italy and my last professor at U of T. Neither of them knows anything useful." "Your background before Toronto is thorough," she says. He stares at her. "You were AU Commission Intelligence, Linguistic Analysis and Field Translation. You worked 3 West African conflict zones and a shipping dispute that involved parties I recognize." She does not confirm or deny. "Why are you working in a kitchen?" The answer she gives him is the truth, but a narrow truth, that a mission went wrong in Lagos 18 months ago, that she was extracted and given a new identity and told to stay quiet in a low-profile posting until things cooled. The Meridian was the posting. She does not tell him that the mission that went wrong involved his organization. Not yet. His grandfather calls on the 4th day. Jae-won stands at his office window with the phone against his ear and listens to the grandfather deliver his pronouncement in full coastal Gyeongsang-do, slower than usual, deliberately paced, so that each syllable arrives with its full weight. "그 여자는 곁에 두어라. 그녀는 네가 볼 수 없는 것을 볼 수 있어. 그리고 잊지 마. 그 여자 할머니는 나한테 비친 게 없어. 나 쪽에서 비친 게 거야." Keep the woman close. She sees what you cannot. And remember, her grandmother owes me nothing. The debt runs the other way. He hangs up without waiting for a response. Jae-won stands at his window for a long time, watching the lake. He is thinking about debts, about what it means to owe something to a dead woman you've never met, about a brass compass with 3 characters on the case. He is thinking about the woman in the cream blouse and what she is still not telling him. Over the following 3 weeks, Adaeze is embedded in Jae-won's inner circle under the designation of Cultural Liaison and Translation Consultant, a title specific enough to explain her presence and vague enough to explain nothing. She attends meetings, she translates, she sits in rooms that have never had a black woman in them and translates the subtext of power negotiations with a precision that more than once changes outcomes. There is a meeting with a Cantonese property developer in which Adaze's translation of a particular hesitation in the developer's phrasing, the way he avoids the word timeline in favor of intention, alerts Jae-won to a financing gap that the developer is concealing. The deal is restructured. $2 million are saved. There is a meeting with a Montreal logistics consortium in which the lead negotiator makes a joke in Quebecois slang about the way park money moves fast and smells clean, an old money laundering joke dressed as a compliment. Adaeze catches it, gives Jae-won the single signal they have agreed upon, a slight tilt of the water glass, and Jae-won ends the meeting with a politeness so pointed it constitutes a threat. Word begins to move through the corridors of Bay Street and its shadow world beneath it, that Park Jae-won has found something, a compass, a translator who hears the room. Word moves in other directions too. Kevin Lim, reassigned to the outer ring of the organization after the Black Vault meeting, begins making calls to parties whose interests are antithetical to Jae-won's. He is careful. He uses clean phones. He speaks in a code that is, unfortunately for him, a code that Adaeze helped develop 3 years ago for a different organization in a different city. The file Kevin Lim compiled on Adaeze is handed to him in a parking structure at Front and Simcoe on Tuesday evening at 7. It is thorough. It includes her AU commission profile, her Lagos mission file, partially redacted but legible in the important places, and a single document that Kevin considers his most lethal finding, a surveillance photograph from Lagos 18 months ago showing Adaeze Okonkwo in conversation with a man named Chidi Eke. Chidi Eke ran the Lagos end of a container shipping network. Park Jae-won destroyed that network. Chidi Eke was Adaze's uncle. Kevin Lim takes the photograph and the file to the meeting he has arranged at the Meridian, not the Black Vault, which is Jae-won's ground, but a surface-level private dining room he has booked under a false name. He is meeting with representatives of a rival consortium, the Sung-il Group out of Vancouver, who want the Great Lakes Corridor and have wanted it for 7 years. She's intelligence. She was put there to get close, Kevin says, sliding the photograph across the table. She's not a translator. She's a weapon pointed at Jae-won's head, or she was. Maybe she's been turned. Either way, she's not what she says she is, and the old man doesn't know it. The Sung-il representatives look at the photograph. "How do you want this handled?" they ask. Kevin says a single word. Outside the private dining room, through a ventilation grill in the ceiling of the service corridor, Adaeze Okonkwo has been listening for 40 minutes. She has a recording. She goes directly to Jae-won. It is 11 at night. His office is lit against the Toronto skyline like a lantern. He is alone, working through a contracts binder with the focused isolation of a man who has learned not to trust the night to anyone else. She sits across from him and places her phone on the desk between them, plays the recording. He listens without moving. His face does the thing it does, absorbs, processes, reveals nothing. When it ends, he looks at her. "Chidi Eke." "My mother's brother," she says. "Yes." "You came here because of him." She breathes. "I came here because of him, but I didn't come here to burn you. I came here to find out if you gave the order personally." The distinction hangs between them. In the language of organized crime, this is the difference between a king and a soldier, between a man who chose a death and a man who inherited a system that delivered it. He owed money across 4 jurisdictions, Jae-won says, which is not a denial of anything. He owed money because your organization built the architecture that made his network dependent on your logistics and then called the debt in simultaneously on all 4 lines. He had no way to survive it. That was a design, not a consequence. Jae-won is quiet. "Was it you?" she asks, and her voice carries the Yoruba stillness her grandmother taught her, the particular flatness that means this is the question and there will be no second version of it. The architecture was built before I took the reins, he says slowly. The simultaneous call was executed by Shanghai on instructions that predate my tenure. Shanghai, she says, who was in that room 3 Thursdays before my grandfather arrived. The thread comes full circle. Shanghai, already removed, had been the instrument. The Sung-il group, who had been quietly pressuring park operations for years, had likely provided the original directive. Her uncle's death was not personal. It was infrastructure, a debt engineered to destroy. This is not absolution, but it is something different than what she came here believing. I need to know what you're going to do with what you know about me, she says. I need to know the same about you, he says. They sit in the lit office above the dark city and look at each other across the recording on the desk between them. It is Adaeze who speaks first. My grandmother used to say, Onye wetera oji wetera ndu. He who brings cola brings life. The cola nut is the first thing offered at a meeting of importance. It says, I am here in good faith. I intend peace. She pauses. I don't have cola, but I have Kevin Lim on tape planning to sell you to your enemies. That's what I'm offering. In exchange for what? He asks. In exchange for the documentation trail on my uncle's debt structure, the original contracts, proof that it was engineered. His family, my family, has been living with the stigma of a man they think chose failure. I want the record corrected. Jae-won looks at her for a long time. That's all? He says. That's everything, she says. He understands. For a woman like Adaeze Okonkwo, a woman raised in the tradition that the worst thing that can be done to a person is the erasure of their name's dignity, restoring a dead man's honor is not a small ask. It is the only ask worth making. He picks up his phone and makes a call. Get me the Eke file from the Lagos archive. All of it. Original contracts, communications, everything. Tonight. He hangs up. Kevin will be handled, he says. You have my word. In my grandmother's dialect, they say a man's word is the only currency that cannot be counterfeited. My grandfather says the same thing in Busan. For the first time since she walked into the Black Vault, Adaeze Okonkwo allows herself a smile. It is small and private and carries 60 years of history in it. Kevin Lim's extraction from the organization is surgical and permanent, achieved in a manner that leaves no marks and no questions. The Sung-il group, deprived of their inside intelligence, makes one further aggressive move, an attempt to interrupt a Great Lakes shipment through false customs documentation, which fails so completely and so publicly that it constitutes a message delivered in the language everyone in that world understands. The Vancouver corridor goes quiet. Park Dae-shik flies back to Busan on a Thursday. At the airport, he gives Jae-won a single instruction in full coastal Gyeongsang-do. Kuyoja iramul kiokera, ku irami 앞으로 문을 열어줄 거야. Remember that woman's name. That name will open doors ahead of you. Then, to Adaeze, standing 3 feet away, he says something that he has clearly prepared. 지드마 할머니한테 전해줘. 나는 약속 지켰다고. Tell Chidima's granddaughter I kept my promise. Adaeze bows, a proper Gyeongsang-do bow, deep and specific and correct, and says the 3 Yoruba words her grandmother taught her to say if she ever found herself face to face with a man from Busan. The old man's eyes do the thing again. They move. He does not cry. He is a mountain that does not move. But he stands in the airport departure hall for a moment that is 1 second longer than necessary before he turns away. Adaeze watches him go and thinks about brass compasses, about the weight of what the living carry for the dead, about the particular mercy of getting to lay something down. The Eke family arrives 2 weeks later, 14 years of documents, original and unredacted, showing precisely how the debt architecture was constructed and by whom. Adaeze hires a lawyer. She takes the documentation to the Lagos Business Council that had posthumously condemned her uncle's reputation. The process takes 6 months and is ugly in the way that truth usually is when it has been buried for a long time. Resistant, corrosive, resistant again. But it yields. Chidi Eke's name is cleared. His assets, seized under the debt ruling, are returned in part to his children. His eldest daughter, who had stopped using her father's name professionally, begins using it again. Adaeze's mother calls her from Ibadan on the day the ruling comes through. "Your grandmother would be proud," she says. "I know," Adaeze says. "She would also ask why you're still in Canada." "Tell her I have work to finish," Adaeze says, and smiles at the ceiling of her apartment. The work she has to finish is at Park Industries' newly established Cultural Intelligence Division, her own title, her own desk, her own mandate. The division exists because Jae-won spent 3 weeks after the Black Vault incident doing what he does best, identifying a structural weakness in his operation and systematically addressing it. The weakness, as he now understands it, was not linguistic, it was architectural. He had built an empire on the assumption that his world would always speak to him in languages he already knew. That assumption, as Adaeze had demonstrated in 11 words, was a vulnerability. The division is small, 4 people including Adaeze. They do not move product or broker deals. They listen. They translate, not just language, but culture, context, the unspoken grammar of every room they enter. They are the connective tissue between Jae-won's Western operations and the global networks he is expanding into, West Africa, the Korean diaspora in Southeast Asia, the multilingual corridors of the Gulf. It is not, on its surface, the position Adaeze imagined for herself when she was a 22-year-old AU analyst who believed that intelligence work meant field operations and extraction missions and the particular adrenaline of high-consequence moments. It is, in fact, exactly the position she was made for. There is one more thing. 6 weeks after the Sung-il situation resolves, Jae-won calls Adaeze into his office on a Friday afternoon. He is standing by the window again. He is often by the window, she has noticed, as if the lake provides something the room cannot. He hands Adaeze a small object wrapped in cloth. She unwraps it. It is a brass compass, naval issue, old enough to have weight and patina. On the case, 3 characters, worn but readable. Ichima, don't forget. Her hands go still. My grandfather kept it all these years, Jae-won says. He said the nurse who owned it gave it to him because he was homesick and it was the only navigation tool she had. He kept it because he said the person who gives their compass away is the bravest person they've ever met. That they were telling you, I trust you to find your own way home. Adaeze turns the compass over in her hands. She can feel 70 years of thumbprints in the brass. He said to give it back, Jae-won says. It belongs with her blood now, that the debt was always going the other direction. He owed her a compass that would lead her people home. Adaeze stands at the window of a 34th floor office above a city that is not her city and holds a brass compass that crossed a war, crossed 70 years, crossed 2 cultures that should never have found each other and found each other anyway in the wreckage of a world that was burning. She does not cry. She was raised by a woman who did not cry, instead pressed her palms flat against hard surfaces, tables, floors, the cool sides of cooking pots, and breathed until the feeling became something she could carry. She presses her palm flat against the glass of the window, breathes. In Ibadan, in a house with a courtyard full of mango trees, there is a framed photograph on the mantelpiece. An old photograph, black and white, curling at the corners despite the frame. It shows a young woman in a nurse's uniform standing beside a young man in a hospital cot, both of them squinting slightly in the direction of whoever is holding the camera. They are not touching, they are not even close, but the way they are angled towards each other, the slight lean, the quality of attention, tells a story that the photograph's frame cannot contain. Below the photograph, on a small shelf, there used to be a brass compass. Now the shelf holds something else, a handwritten note in 2 languages, on one side in Gyeongsang-do characters, on the other in Yoruba. Both sides say the same thing. 바다는 아는 사람에게만 속을 보여준다. 오쿤 니아시리 풍에니 토모 비아심 모이누레. The sea only shows its depths to the one who knows how to look in it. In the black vault beneath the Meridian Private Club, the table is set for a meeting that is not happening tonight. The amber lights are low. The Macassar ebony reflects a room that is, for the first time in its history, empty in a way that feels chosen rather than abandoned. Upstairs, Bay Street moves in its eternal circulation of money and ambition and carefully constructed surfaces. But in the black vault, something has shifted in the architecture of who gets to sit at the head of the table. And somewhere in the kitchen corridor, where the real work of the world has always been done, there is a brass compass sitting on a stainless steel shelf pointing true north. Epilogue, Ibadan, Nigeria, 3 months. Adaeze's mother has placed the compass in a glass case beside the photograph. Her grandmother's friends, the last 3 of them, ancient and magnificent, women who remember the war as a lived thing rather than a historical abstraction, come to see it on a Sunday afternoon. They take turns holding it. They say things in Yoruba that Adaeze's mother does not fully translate, because some things that the very old say to each other are not meant for younger ears. But one of them, the oldest, 91 years old and still straight-spined, says something clearly enough that Adaeze, who was there via video call, the phone propped against a water glass on the mantelpiece, catches every word. Chidima moke o manpada, ashato jinle mampada. Chidima knew that it would come back. The deep things always come back. Adaeze, 34th floor, Toronto, looks at the woman on her phone screen and thinks about dialects, about the way language is a kind of memory, about the way 2 people can speak the same deep tongue and find each other across 70 years and 2 continents and the body of a war. She thinks about brass, about compasses, about what it means to give someone your navigation when you need it most, and what it means when that gift, after all that time, finally finds its way home. And just like that, Adaeze Okonkwo proved that the deepest language is not spoken in any dialect on earth, but in the grammar of what we choose to carry for each other across the distance. She didn't just settle a blood debt, she found the compass her grandmother had been pointing toward her whole life. True north, home.